Welcome to another edition of the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. I'm Don Grodoff. Along with my wife Gina, we have a practice called Focused Healthy Family, helping families get past the behavior and anxiety issues naturally. We also produce the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, where we are advocates for our own family and others dealing with OCD and anxiety. In the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast, we do interviews, provide resources, and information for treatment and support of OCD recovery. We also want to hear from you, your comments, and if you want to tell your story, we want to put it up on the podcast, on our Stories from the OCD side. Our goal in these podcasts is to raise awareness of and advocate for the recovery from obsessive compulsive disorder, better known as OCD. Now, before we get to that podcast, let's hear about our sponsor.
Today I'm here to talk about Q Science's sleep spray. Q Sciences has a number of different sprays. There's a melatonin sleep spray that contains melatonin, 5-HTP, and L-theanine. We've used other melatonin products to help our children with falling asleep. Melatonin is something that occurs naturally in our body that helps us quiet and calm down for sleep. And yet I really feel like I've seen a difference in the spray versus other products. Our youngest is here to talk about it. What things did you like better about the spray versus the other things?
I don't like the chew tablets because they leave like a weird taste, and they're mainly like they also have like you get bits in your teeth.
Okay, so Q Science's spray.
It's a lot better, I'd say. The taste is pretty decent and it works well.
Okay. I'm happy with the quality of these products and how they're helping our whole family. If you'd like to learn more,
simply go to qsciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com. That's the letter Q, sciences.focusedhealthyfamily.com, or visit invisiblewheelchair.com and find out more information there.
There are a lot of supplement products out there, yet you want one that's of good quality. Check out Q Sciences for your family.
Now, let's get to that podcast. This podcast was put together May 27th, 2022. This is podcast number 69, talking about EFT and the changes going on with the Invisible Wheelchair Podcast around EFT. So we're doing it a little differently this time. We are putting together a podcast by taking a podcast that I did with Gina on our Focused Healthy Family podcast about EFT, because I thought it was a good transition to talk about how I'm changing the podcast. As you may have known, if you've been on this podcast before, we used to do a tapping podcast after each of the main podcasts, and we do them based on that theme. So what we're doing now is we're going to change it out. I'm going to be doing a tapping session on just once per month on the podcast, where I'll talk about a certain issue and then do a tapping around that issue. So it'll be once a month instead of with each of the podcast. So we want to get to the recording we did on the Focused Healthy Family podcast about EFT. So let's do that, get to that now.
So in today's podcast, we're talking about tapping into self-care. We're talking about EFT.
Emotional freedom techniques. Something that I am a practitioner of, but the neat thing about it was you got me into it.
Well, and you got me into it. If you remember, sometime after our second child was born, so she was born in 2002, I was home. I was working very part-time, but was home a lot more with the kids, and I was really struggling. And I think we realized I had struggled with some depression for years, and you wanted to find you felt like needed someone to talk to, a counselor, or something like that. Do you remember this, Dawn? And you were asking around, and someone suggested Jan Luther.
She was at Unity.
Right, but someone recommended her to you. I don't know if it was Mike Love or somebody recommended her, that she was an EFT practitioner, which we really didn't know anything about at that time.
No, I thought it was kind of voodoo.
So for whatever reason, right? So I agreed to do this. I think I went to her individually first because she did group sessions too at Unity. Yeah, she would have monthly or whatever, where group tapping things. So I started going to her for my own self, and I learned about tapping. I learned EFT, and I learned this technique. Found that it was really helping me. It was, it was more than therapy. It was a way of using an energy modality to.
Yeah, it's an energy change, is what.
Jan started doing training for EFT practitioners, and I was at her very first training session that she ever did, that was held there at Unity. And I did level 1 training, and then I went on to do level 2 training. And somewhere in the middle of this, you started seeing her for yourself.
Well, you remember I was having some family issues, some things with my mom that were really starting to get to me. And
oh yeah, okay.
And you were the one that suggested going to Jan, and I was like, tapping, what, I remember thinking, like I said, thinking it was kind of almost like voodoo in a way, just not really, but I mean, just this idea that it was foreign to my mind, this energy thing and all this stuff. It didn't make a lot of sense.
There's a theme here, because you said the same thing when I sent you to the naturopathic doctor.
Yeah, it's something about voodoo, I guess. I don't know, it's those dolls I have at home,
Things I suggest that you think are strange, but then you turn them into your life's work. Okay.
So I started going to Jan, and maybe what I should do first is explain what EFT is. So cut the mystery out just a little bit here, and then we can tell a bit more about, how it developed for me.
Right. So what is EFT, right? You're sitting there. What is this?
So emotional freedom techniques, developed back in the late 80s by Gary Craig. It's an energy modality. There's a couple different things when I talk to clients about it, I tell. One is if you know acupuncture, then you've come very close to because it follows very close in theory to what acupuncture is.
The same meridians, if you understand acupuncture.
But the way the layman's way I kind of explain it to my clients is, because it's talking about energy, and I tell them, think about your home, your house that you live in. It has energy coming into it, and it comes in through a big wire. It's either up above or underground. And then that energy has to be distributed out. It has to go to the plugs, to the air conditioner, all the different things. What you're laughing?
There's another story in that, electricity and outlets, but.
Well, yeah, we'll get that maybe today, maybe not. So anyway, you have the electricity coming, energy now, because even Duke is now called Duke Energy instead of Duke Electric. And it has to be distributed out, and it's done through the wires in the wall. Well, our body works very similar to that. We have energy as I'm sitting here and you're sitting where you're at. You and I are on separate planes right now, as far as where, not planes, but different areas. Different locations. We have energy flowing through us, and it too has to be distributed out to the cells, to the organs, to the brain, everywhere. And so within us, we have what I call invisible wires. They're called meridians, or pathways of this energy that help distribute that energy to where it needs to go. And what happens when we get into a negative situation, a trauma, anxiety, those pathways get messed up. They get out of alignment. And so we want to bring them back into alignment. And so what we're doing is and unfortunately we're not in, this is audio, so you can't see it, but we're taking, I just use my pointer finger and the finger next to it, tapping on different end points of those pathways. And by doing that, I kind of look at it as it brings it back into vibration to align them so that energy is flowing well. Because that energy not flowing well is causing anxiety or fight or flight. And we really want to bring that down. We want to bring the fight or flight down. And by doing the tapping, we're lowering that anxiety, lowering fight or flight. The added plus to it that acupuncture doesn't have is we include in it, I call it, like kind of talk therapy, where we're expressing out these negative thoughts, these negative feelings that we're doing as we're doing the tapping. And the two are very powerful together. It's acupuncture meets talk therapy. And it's a very powerful source of lowering anxiety and then also being able to release or to change the different negative things that are going on in our life.
So if you watch Gary Craig videos, when he developed EFT, he talks through it, but it's very simple talking, right? You learn from Jan Luther. She's a master EFT practitioner who was a student of Gary Craig's, one of the original people that became a master practitioner. She kind of took it to a whole new level with the way she did it, right? Because Gary did a lot with physical illnesses and other things, and there's talking involved, but it didn't delve as deeply as the way Jan does EFT, and the way, other people like you've done and other people that have trained under her. So yeah, if you watch videos on Gary Craig, you can do it very simply. You don't have to have it doesn't really look like talk therapy either. It's more reframing how you say things, kind of acknowledging where you're at and what you're feeling. And you can also use it to kind of positive affirmations. You can tap in positive things as well.
Well, Jan, and I kind of back to Jan, but she was always, she just had this intuitive sense that was unbelievable. I always kind of said unbelievable, because it was like she could see through you, and you would have these moments, and I've had some of this too with my own clients, but these moments where you go, how did you know that? How did you come up with those words to say and those thoughts to come up with? So she was just that intuitive. And so when I started with her, throughout the time I think I worked with her, as we got to know each other and work more together, she would always kind of put this little bug in my ear. I think you'd really be good at this. Have you thought about that? And of course I always put it down, as kind of back burner. Yeah, it's maybe someday, when all the lights are green, I'll do it.
Yeah, you were busy considering becoming a Unity minister. Do you remember that?
There was a lot of.
I was doing training with her because she had brought that idea up to me, and I'm like, well, I'm doing this more for me and my family. I didn't see myself going out and doing it with other clients. And
and then of course then came along what really drove me to a point of, I call it the sledgehammer to the head, or the 2x4 to the head, was
you had done a level 1 training before that happened.
Well, I actually did level,
or had you done level 1 and level 2?
Yeah, but I redid level 2 after this. But
you had somewhere in there you had decided to kind of move forward with this, but you were still building websites.
And we talk about, I think in one of the first podcasts, when our first daughter, the OCD hit, and you and I start using it for ourselves, for the family, and for her. That's where I start getting the thought of more and more that I want it, because my belief was, and our belief is, about wanting to help other families.
So that was 2010.
Who are going through this, but then it was my heart attack that was, like I said, my 2x4 to the head.
May 4th, 2011.
Yeah, and it was powerful. It was just, I couldn't avoid it any longer. It was a passion that I really feel very strongly about. And I think you do too, even though it's not your practice, you feel, I think, pretty strongly about it's good for you, how it does wonders for people.
Oh, yeah, it does. I went to worked with Jan for years personally. When I first went went to her. Anytime she did another class, a group class, I was there. Like
We were groupies.
I couldn't get enough of it. I've gone on to work with another practitioner here locally. That's someone I really connected with on different levels. And so, yeah, we've really utilized it. I had also learned Reiki, which is another energy modality. I kind of have this toolkit of things I've learned that kind of can be helpful with self-care. And there's a lot of overlap there. And they're very different modalities, Reiki and EFT, yet there's they're energy modalities. And I think, you talked about what Jan brought to it. She definitely brought a spiritual connection to it. You can do EFT without having any religious beliefs or anything. Yet she brought the spiritual component to it that, when she brought things into the conversation, you talk about her intuitiveness, right? She felt like things were coming to her through spirit. Call it whatever you want. It is very effective.
She had this energy about her. I like being around her because it was just, it's hard to describe. And I think for our audience, it might be hard to kind of understand this, but when you change your energy, I always we talked about consciousness, when you get to a place of when you're really tuned into yourself and the self, this is why we're talking about self-care, tuning into yourself to realize what's going on for you. You recognize when you change your energy and it's better flowing energy, better good energy, you can feel the other energy, the opposite energy from a mile away. With Jan, being around her, you could just feel this and lifting energy to her,
Yes, Yeah. All of us maybe can think about a person we've been around and it felt good to be around them, right? You wanted to spend time with them. Maybe you never thought about why you like them so much, but people who have, I would call it a positive energy, who are uplift other people, who are open.
I think I need to tell this little story just to show what good energy is and what Jan's energy was when her son was killed. And I went to the funeral.
He died in a motorcycle accident. Yeah.
I've never walked out of a ceremony, a funeral, uplifted. And with Jan, she gave the eulogy, and I walked out of there feeling wonderful. It was really strange because a little bit of guilt there because I was like, I should be sad or I should be, feeling down or something,
Why am I feeling good coming out?
So, that's what I believe the power of this can do for you. So part of self-care is changing your energy, helping to lift your energy up to be able to live better, to live in a better way. I don't know. That's.
And on the tails of what you just said, before you get into explaining EFT a little more, me and Jan and another woman had started meeting. We all had books we were going to write. And we started like a weekly group where we went out and met at a coffee house and we kind of shared and inspired each other with our writing. And I think that was around 2004, sometime around there. I can't remember what path her book was going to take, but after her son died, it turned into her book, which is entitled Grief is Mourning Sickness. And so she was in the process of writing a book, but I think it shifted gears when she went through that experience. And now she does a whole lot of things focused around grief, but it's an amazing book. We'll have to share in the links to her book and just how, she went through that experience. I think she talks about it in her book and just how she was able to handle it. It's just kind of amazing and inspiring.
Well, and yet her response to everything it's interesting. She doesn't have a judgment one up or down with it. It's just, that's interesting. And
she has moments where but
I mean,
I want to speak for her, but she inspires you to stop. And when things happen, instead of reacting, to be just like, well, isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
A child's anxiety is flaring up and they're yelling and screaming, isn't that interesting? And it's taking that a sense of curiosity about things that are happening. And that's a kind of a whole nother topic. Mind Mama talks about that too, a podcast that I love listening to. Sounds like it's
So,
time, though, to explain EFT a little more. Maybe we could kind of talk through a session.
well, I think what I was thinking of is how I use it for my own self-care. Because what I've learned to do now, I use it when I do my meditations in the morning. I tie
Mhm.
it into, even if now with the process of tapping, what we're doing is, as a practitioner of it, I usually talk a lot to my clients and ask them to tell me about this, what's going on for them, and then we start digging into it. And I really want to get their words, because it's not me and my words, it's really their words that we're working on.
So you
So
ask questions before you start the tapping.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
we kind of dig in, and then what we do is, I do a lot of, because we want to get down to like what I call the I messages when we're starting to talk about ourselves, about a situation or a person or a thing that's bothering us. Because we
Mhm.
will come out with one message, but I call surface message. I dig down and start asking about, you know, because, and if that happens, then what? Till we get down to when they're coming up with these deeper messages of, you know, I'm not good enough, or, and so we're taking those messages and then literally tapping on them, and just going around tapping on. There's about 15 points that we tap on. We start a lot of times on either top of the head, and then we go above the eye, or like right above the nose.
Well,
We go,
the setup.
all right, why don't you explain that? If you, I mean,
I learned the way Jan started it, and I stick with there's the great thing about it is there's no one specific way you have to do it, right? There's these tapping points that you can follow, and there's different ways of doing it. And I remember Jan telling me you can't do it wrong.
well, yeah, because I always like to make
Just
a very big,
remember one point and you tap on that point. You can't do it wrong, right? There's
I
kind
always
of
like to make a point for my clients, because what happens is they, by like the second session, they'll come in and go, I didn't know which point. I stopped because I couldn't remember the pattern. What I want to kind of make understand is, it's the points are important, but what to me what's really important is that we're going through what's going on for us in our mind, and working through that. So I don't like to get too stuck on it has to be this first, or any certain point first. But you're right. I mean, a lot of times we'll do the setup first along the edge of the hand, what's called a karate chop point. Because if you imagine the if you were doing a karate chop like they used to do with the Atlanta team, I won't go through that, but
or karate, and you're breaking a board. So
yeah,
the
you that edge there
side of
where,
your hand where your pinky is, right?
yeah,
And there's different ways to do that setup. I learned where you take the one hand, like on my left hand, open, flat open. I take the right hand, and just like if I was cutting a board, I use my hand to hit on the other hand, so that you can also just tap on that
yeah.
outside.
I use my two fingers, my pointer and the other finger, to tap right along that same edge.
Mhm.
And then, like I say, I either move to the top of the head, the very, very top, or above the eye, where the eyebrow, either one of the eyebrows. You can actually use both, like both hands if you wish. And then you move to the side of the eye where the eyebrow stops. Then you go right underneath the eye, like right along the bone of the socket of the eye. Then you
The,
go under the nose. What's that?
the orbital bone.
Orbital bone. Yeah, my OT wife tells us. And then you go on the chin, and then go collarbone, which is, well, I'm trying to think what would be the best way to describe where your collarbone is.
It's your clavicle.
Uh, and if you don't know where clavicle is, for a man, it's about where your bow tie, where your tie ties.
Well,
You
that's where it
know,
comes together at the top of your sternum. Um,
so
go
it's like,
down your throat, and you feel that hole where all the bones come together, and then you come out along those bones. It's kind of really right under your clavicle if you're a
yeah.
student of anatomy.
And then you go under the arm about 4 inches down, and then top of the head. Like I said, you can either begin at the top or end at the top. And then as we're doing that, we're literally expressing some of those usually more simple phrases or terms.
Mm-hmm.
When we do the along the karate chop point, we do what we call an even though statement. Even though I have this problem or this situation or this thing that's bothering me, I still totally and completely love and accept myself. And I like that statement because it's kind of like the mind takes a breath of, takes a breath like, oh, okay, so I'm not bad person because I have this problem. I'm still okay. And it really helps to kind of break the tension. In fact, that karate chop point is there to help cut resistance that might be going on, the mind's own resistance to this kind of healing factor.
And there's different ways to do that setup phrase. I've seen it done differently. There's variations. And yet we learned that phrase from her, and we used that, and we used it with our kids. Even though I'm feeling this is going on, I completely and totally love and accept myself.
Accept myself.
Yes. And so we taught this to our daughter. She was 8 when her OCD, whatever, had the sudden onset of it, and we're dealing with all her issues. And we used tapping.
Well, didn't she used to say, let's do that accept ourselves thing or something?
I don't think it was her that said that.
I thought it was because but okay. Well,
8, she spoke really well. Accept myself.
Accept myself, yes. Again, using this in self-care is being able to tie it in throughout your day. People always ask me, well, when do I do it? How long do I do it? And what I say is, I like to try to do it at least once a day, and then as needed. But it really is up to you. And as far as length, well, do what you have time for, even if it's 5 minutes. I guess best way to do it is to be able to do it through the anxiety till the anxiety comes back down. As you're feeling the anxiety comes in, you start tapping. And again, not getting wrapped into the pattern as much as being able to hit a spot at least. Mm-hmm. My favorite spot is, I call it my emergency spot, is my collarbone. And what I tell clients is that there may be a point that as you're tapping on it, that has this extra different feeling to it. Everybody's might be different. Mine happened to be the collarbone. When I first started doing this, when I hit it, it just felt something a little different. It was a little extra. I think a little extra lift was on that particular spot. Some people, it hits emotions, and that's okay because you want to get through that. The other thing I have people tell me is, I stopped because the anxiety start coming up, and I was afraid I was hurting myself. And I said, no, you really want to keep going that. I tell them to move towards that, Yeah, oh my gosh, it's really rearing up. As I'm tapping, I'm saying, I'm really going towards that anxiety. And you really want to keep tapping until it comes down. But so I tie it in throughout the day, even if I'm driving and if I have road rage, not road rage, but if somebody's cut me off and it's really gotten me worked up, I'll hit a spot and just kind of in my mind, I'll work through it and to help me to bring it back down.
And you can do the tapping without words. You can tap on these points. I think it helps to learn the process, because then you don't have to think about where you're tapping.
Yeah.
Right? By doing some sessions and kind of learning it, then you can kind of focus. But you can also just be sitting there and feeling tense and uncomfortable, and you can start tapping just, at your collarbone, kind of just below that bone there. You can do the karate chop in your hand or tap the side of your fingers. There's actually additional points in addition to the ones you've mentioned. But yeah, like while you're driving, you can easily just sit there. And if you're somewhere where people are looking at you, you don't even have to continuously tap, but you can kind of apply pressure to that same
Well, yeah,
area.
rubbing is another way,
Like right under your
rubbing the
collarbone there,
points.
kind of rubbing that area. So you can utilize the component of tapping in so many different ways that can be so helpful. We used it became a nightly ritual with our daughter to help her get to sleep. And I remember our youngest. So she was 1 when we were dealing stuff with our older daughter. And somewhere along the way, we started doing tapping every night. It became something we had to do. But I remember one time the youngest said, she was very vocal from a young age. And she said, "Why are you tapping? Abby's not screaming." Because we used it when our daughter was flaring up so much. And so, she grew up with this as kind of being a part of, that's why I think it was her that said about the love and accept myself, that they felt the energy, the effects of it. It became a tool and part of our life that we utilize to help get through a really difficult time. You talked about when you had your heart attack, and that's what kind of pushed you into like pursuing this and getting out of website work and all this other stuff that was just stressing you out, and being in business for yourself for a long time and dealing with all these issues, and just so growing in this new business with working with people when you had your heart attack. So the medics arrived, you went into cardiac arrest, like right when they got there. They kind of took us out of the living room, which we just went through a doorway into the kitchen that we have a half a stairwell there. And I sat down with the kids and I just started tapping. And you were like in VFib, VTAC, your heart was not functioning properly. They were doing CPR, they were defibrillating you, but not getting results. Like they're around the corner, but I'm hearing everything. And because I work in healthcare, I understood what they were saying. And for some reason, I was able to take our kids who were 2, 9, and 13 and sit on the stairs and start tapping. And Don, I really believe you kind of were there with me, because you were sort of not really with your body, and that guided me to do that. Because I think about it afterwards, it's like, how was I able to do that? And one of the kids, she went upstairs. I've talked about this with my kids, to remember it, but I utilized it then, and I utilized it throughout your whole experience in the hospital and in so many other different times in our life, that it's kind of bound us together in many ways. And it's been such a tool that's been so helpful in all of our healing. I know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about, you talked about the mindfulness, because this is all we're talking about self-care and things that we can do for our self-care. And so if you want to just share with us, Don, like in your morning, kind of how your routine goes and how you.
I've always been one, we've talked about meditation, and I think we're probably going to do a little bit more on it. But to me, meditation was always this thing I couldn't figure out, and because the problem was I imagined it as being like this, you're supposed to be on like this mountaintop, and you crisscross your legs, and you have your hands open, and you're doing this humming thing, or this kind of thing, and so it was just always really strange to me, and I just never thought I could get there.
Another one of those woo-woo things.
Yeah, but what I kind of developed in my own mind, and now I pass on to my clients, is that it's kind of whatever you get lost in, what you can lose yourself into, that really is good for me. I don't know if you remember back when we went to the Yanni concert. Oh, wow. And I that music to me has always been one I can lose myself into. Where you've come up behind me before when I've been into myself and like tapped on my shoulder, and I'm not, just kind of startles me because I'm just kind of in focus in myself or whatever. And anyway, when we were in that concert, I felt like I almost left the concert.
Very meditative.
And so what I do for myself now is really just tune into myself. I usually close my eyes. I'll use tapping. I'll just tap without putting words to it. Tap on my collarbone or tap on a point, and I'll ask myself the question, how are you doing? And what's going on inside? And really try to feel what's going on inside myself. If am I feeling crappy? And what's behind that? And so that when I tune in, so I can really be aware of what's going on for me. Because I
So
think awareness is that first step to consciousness, to tuning into self, to being anyway, so it's really a bit, so and so then I can then from there decide what I might be able to do to kind of change course for myself.
back up a little bit, Don, and just we're talking about self-care and ways we can take care of ourselves, and just go briefly through in the morning when you wake up and kind of, you do a number of different things before you even do the tapping, right? So just talk kind of about all the things that you do that are part of your self-care routine in the morning.
Well, it's first thing I try to do is either take a very brisk walk. I have my cardio hill, that I do a good brisk walk up to, and I'll try to do some. I go on YouTube and I find there's a couple that do the exercise kind of, and I'll do a 20-minute workout with them.
If you can't get outside, yeah, you'll do
Yeah.
that instead.
Then I'll just slow myself down, sit down. First I check in with, that's when I do the check in with myself. Close my eyes.
And you do tapping.
What's going on for me? How's it going?
So you
And
tap as you're checking in? You just
sometimes I'll do a full tap, I'll start doing a full pattern of tap. And then other times I'll just hit a point. It just depends on, and sometimes I don't say anything with the tap, and sometimes I'll verbalize like what's going on. Whatever's coming to me, I'll just put it out there. Wow, I'm really feeling odd this morning, or I'm feeling off, and wonder what's going on, what's behind that, and I'll just tap around on the different points. And then, like I said, I like to I like to get into Esther Hicks. You got me going on her rampages that she does, and the morning meditations.
You can look up Abraham Hicks. We can share that in the link too.
And I'll tap along with that, and a lot of times verbalize what she's putting out in those different meditations and things that she does. And then it gets into just getting into breakfast and getting into the day.
Usually put on, there's a meditative.
Yeah, Jason Stevenson on YouTube does these. He uses frequencies within these. It's music, I guess you'd say, but it's not like singing or anything like that. It's just what would you call that, harmonic?
Yeah, kind of music? Tones, because like if
tones.
You look up on YouTube, because there's like swirling colors. It's just sort of like a meditative tones or whatever. Because I'll come downstairs and you'll just be sitting there with that on. I didn't know if that's when you were tapping or.
Well, it kind of varies. It kind of varies. Sometimes I'll do it like before, like I've done the Rampage or the Esther Hicks stuff. Sometimes I do it after. It just. I don't know, kind of leave it open to whatever I feel.
You kind of leave it on and then you go get breakfast and, either I come down or, kids come down and that, so that's playing in the background.
I get a little roll eye every once in a while, like, oh, what, you doing that again, Dad? Kind of thing. But they've actually sometimes, Lexi will come down and just sit and just sit there, or she'll sit through the Rampage.
So you kind of have this setup, of what things that you've done, right? And it kind of sets the energy. We talk about that, how our kids' energy matches our energy. And so I know it kind of helped motivate me with my own routine, which took me a lot longer to kind of develop kind of a morning sort of meditation practice, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you sharing kind of, and finding what works for you, right? Finding a way, like you incorporate the tapping into what kind of a meditation and sitting in the quiet. And there's a lot of different ways to do it.
So I mean, you bike ride, some people, they jog or they run, and my walking, I do a lot of times will meditate and tap as I'm walking too. But yeah, I mean, it's just, like I said, swimming or, reading a book, at a certain time, and that doesn't even have to be like a self-help book. It just be one that you really enjoy, that kind of.
And I think it's important to have kind of a routine of, you talked to me for years about don't you think it'd be good to start your day with some meditation? Don't you think it would be a good idea to kind of start your day? Because when I go to work, I get up as early as I possibly can and I get ready as quickly as I can, because the sooner I get to work, the sooner I'm done. I don't work a shift. I work to treat patients for so many hours. And so I can go in at 7 and get done, earlier, or go in at 9 and I'll be done later. And so my mind was always stuck on the, I want to get up and get into work so I can come back home. Right. And you would kind of plant this idea about, and I'm realizing since I've been doing kind of having a thing in the morning, it's just starting out your day with that initial, taking a few minutes, kind of focusing on what matters before you read email, before you looking at Facebook, you're thinking about your to-do list, everything that's got to be done, all those kinds of things, of how powerful it really is. And maybe you can't do it first thing in the morning, pick another time of day, do it whenever you can. But there's such a benefit in having sort of a ritual of, how you start your day or how you end your day, or, kind of having that routine. And when it becomes a routine, it takes less energy to do it. It's like learning the points of tapping by doing it and following a video. You have videos out there, following along. After a number of times, you don't really think about it anymore. You just, it becomes automatic. And so it takes less energy.
This concludes this podcast. We hope you will subscribe if you haven't already. Remember, we would love your comments, or if you have a story to tell, we want to put it up on the podcast. Simply go to invisiblewheelchair.com to do that. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Invisible Wheelchair Podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest, we love guests. So simply go to invisiblewheelchair.com and contact us from there. Gina and I are here to help you or your family get to a better place naturally. Simply visit focusedhealthyfamily.com for more information. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Keep tapping and focusing forward for a better way.